My life, like all my creations, was a testament to order. Precision was paramount. Every line, every curve had its place in the grand design. My home, a masterpiece of modern architecture, reflected this philosophy. Clean lines, minimalist aesthetics, a symphony of light and shadow. And at the center of this carefully constructed universe stood Amelia. Amelia, with her cascading auburn hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea, was the perfect complement. Her grace, her wit, her effortless elegance mirrored the refined simplicity of our surroundings. Our life together was a meticulously choreographed dance, a harmonious balance of passion and intellect. Yet, lately, a dissonance had crept in, an imperceptible tremor in the carefully constructed edifice of our happiness. It began subtly, a misplaced photograph, a forgotten dinner reservation, a fleeting coldness in her eyes that vanished as quickly as it appeared. These were minor deviations, barely perceptible to the untrained eye. But to me, an architect attuned to the slightest shift in the structural integrity of a building, they were unmistakable signs of a hidden flaw. I began to observe Amelia with a newfound scrutiny, a clinical detachment that surprised even myself. Her interactions, her conversations, her every gesture became subjects of intense analysis. I listened for the subtext, the unspoken words, the subtle shifts in her emotional landscape. Like a forensic architect examining the debris of a collapsed structure, I sought to understand the cause of this unexpected rupture. At first, I dismissed these anomalies as mere quirks, the inevitable imperfections in even the most meticulously designed system. But as the days turned into weeks, the tremors intensified. A lingering fragrance of unfamiliar cologne on her scarf, a late-night phone call with an unidentified caller, a sudden interest in art galleries, a world I previously considered frivolous and inconsequential. These were not the actions of a woman content with her life. They were the telltale signs of a yearning, a dissatisfaction, a desire that was no longer finding fulfillment within the confines of our shared existence. A gnawing unease settled within me, a cold dread that threatened to shatter the illusion of perfection I had so carefully cultivated. The unease festered, a persistent hum beneath the surface of our seemingly placid life. My initial instinct was to confront Amelia, to demand answers, to tear down the veil of secrecy that had descended upon our home. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the architect in me, the innate desire to understand the structure of a problem before attempting to solve it. Or perhaps it was a deeper fear, a reluctance to face the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. Instead of confrontation, I chose observation. I became a silent witness, a phantom lurking in the shadows of my own life. I watched Amelia with a detached intensity, studying her every move, every expression, every interaction. I noticed the way her eyes lit up when she received a certain text message, the subtle smile that played on her lips when she answered a call from an unknown number. My suspicions began to coalesce around a figure who had recently entered Amelia's orbit. Julian Vance, a charismatic art critic with a reputation for his sharp wit and even sharper tongue. He was a frequent guest at the gallery openings Amelia had started attending, a man whose presence seemed to electrify the air around her. I observed them from a distance, their interactions a silent play unfolding before my eyes. The way their gazes locked across a crowded room, the shared laughter that seemed to exclude everyone else, the subtle touch of hands that lingered a moment too long. These were not the actions of mere acquaintances. They were the unspoken language of intimacy, the subtle cues of a connection that ran deeper than friendship. My mind, trained to analyze and interpret patterns, began to connect the dots. The late-night phone calls, the unfamiliar cologne, the sudden interest in art. It all pointed to Julian. He was the missing piece of the puzzle, the catalyst that had disrupted the delicate equilibrium of my carefully constructed world. The realization was not accompanied by the rage or jealousy I had expected. Instead, a cold, analytical calm descended upon me. Like an architect discovering a hidden flaw in a seemingly perfect structure, I felt a strange sense of detachment, a desire to understand the nature of this intrusion before deciding how to address it. I continued to observe them, not with the intent to catch them in the act, but to gather information, to understand the dynamics of their relationship, to map the contours of their betrayal. I was no longer merely a husband. I had become an investigator, a strategist, a silent observer gathering evidence for a case that had yet to be filed. The digital age, with its veneer of connectivity, often reveals more than it conceals. I, an architect of physical spaces, found myself delving into the intangible architecture of Amelia's digital life. I wasn't driven by a desire to invade her privacy, but by a need to understand the structural integrity of the relationship I thought I knew. I began with subtle probes, examining the metadata of photos she'd shared, noting the times and locations. I observed her social media activity, not with the intention of public shaming, but to understand the patterns of her communication. I noted the frequency of her interactions with Julian, the late-night messages, the coded language they employed. Then I turned to the shared devices within our home. The tablet left casually on the coffee table, the laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for explicit evidence, but for the subtle clues that would reveal the hidden architecture of their connection. A draft email, unsent, revealed a depth of emotional intimacy that chilled me to the core. A series of deleted messages, recovered with the aid of readily available software, painted a vivid picture of their clandestine meetings. The evidence was not a dramatic revelation, but a slow, creeping realization. Like discovering hairline fractures in the foundation of a building, it revealed the extent of the damage. There were no shouting matches, no tearful confessions. Just the cold, hard data, the digital footprint of their betrayal. I didn't confront Amelia. I didn't even hint at my knowledge. I continued to play the role of the devoted husband, the oblivious partner. But beneath the surface, a plan was forming, a meticulously crafted strategy to address the structural deficiencies in our relationship. I understood that a simple demolition, a violent confrontation, would only create further chaos. I needed a more elegant solution, a way to dismantle their connection without causing collateral damage to the carefully constructed world I had built. I decided to use their own tools against them, to exploit the very vulnerabilities they had exposed. I would become the architect of their downfall, using the blueprints they had provided. The discovery of Amelia's betrayal was like a hairline fracture in a load-bearing wall. It didn't bring the structure crashing down, but it fundamentally compromised its integrity. I knew that any sudden move, any overt display of my knowledge, would only hasten the collapse. Instead, I chose to shore up the facade, to maintain the illusion of normalcy while I worked on a more permanent solution. I became a master of deception, a puppeteer pulling the strings of my own emotions. I smiled, I laughed, I engaged in conversations with Amelia, all the while carefully concealing the turmoil that raged within. I played the role of the oblivious husband, the trusting partner, even as I meticulously gathered information, plotting my next move. Every interaction with Amelia became a performance, a carefully choreographed dance in which I led her through the steps, subtly extracting information, observing her reactions. I listened to her talk about her day, her voice animated as she described an exhibition she had attended with Julian, her eyes sparkling with a light that was no longer meant for me. I feigned interest, asking questions, prompting her to reveal more than she intended. I even encouraged her outings with Julian, suggesting galleries they might enjoy, restaurants they should try. Each suggestion was a calculated move, a way to steer them towards environments where I could observe them discreetly, gather more data points for my plan. My evenings were spent immersed in research, delving into the world of social media, learning the intricacies of online reputation management, exploring the dark underbelly of the internet where information could be manipulated, perceptions could be molded. I became a student of human psychology, studying the dynamics of relationships, the vulnerabilities of the human psyche. I was no longer just an architect of buildings. I was an architect of emotions, a manipulator of perceptions, a silent puppet master pulling the strings of their lives. The facade I presented to the world was a carefully constructed illusion, a mask that hid the cold, calculating mind beneath. And behind that mask, a plan was taking shape, a plan as intricate and elegant as any of my architectural creations. With the blueprint of their affair laid bare, I began the construction of my labyrinth. It wouldn't be a physical maze of high hedges and dead ends, but a psychological one, designed to disorient and confuse, to sow seeds of doubt and suspicion. The first subtle shifts were introduced within our home, that space I had so carefully designed for our shared life. I rearranged the furniture, disrupting the familiar flow, creating a sense of unease. I replaced Amelia's favorite painting with a jarring abstract piece, its discordant colors a constant reminder of the dissonance in our lives. I altered the lighting, casting long shadows that played tricks on the eye, making the familiar seem strange and unsettling. I introduced new routines, disrupting the comfortable rhythm of our days. Dinner, once a predictable affair, became a game of chance, the timing and menu subject to my whims. I would invite guests unexpectedly, forcing Amelia to adapt, to maintain the facade of normalcy while feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. I began to leave objects out of place, a book left open to a suggestive passage, a glass of wine half-finished on the wrong side of the table. These were subtle cues, designed to plant seeds of doubt in Amelia's mind, to make her question her own perceptions, to create a sense of paranoia that would slowly erode her confidence. Outside the confines of our home, I started to manipulate their social environment. I would casually drop Julian's name into conversations with mutual acquaintances, subtly hinting at his flaws, his insecurities. I would engineer encounters, orchestrating situations where Amelia and Julian would be forced to interact with people who held less than favorable opinions of them. I used social media to amplify these whispers, creating a subtle echo chamber of doubt and suspicion. I would like posts that subtly question Julian's integrity, share articles that cast doubt on his professional achievements. I would comment on Amelia's photos, using ambiguous language that could be interpreted as either supportive or accusatory, leaving her to decipher my true intentions. The labyrinth was taking shape, a complex web of subtle manipulations, designed to disorient and confuse, to sow discord and mistrust. It was a slow, insidious process, a gradual erosion of their reality, a descent into a world where nothing was quite as it seemed. My influence extended beyond our immediate social circle. As a respected architect, I had cultivated a network of contacts that spanned the city's cultural landscape. This network, built over years of collaboration and mutual respect, became a tool in my arsenal. Julian, with his aspirations of climbing the ladder of the art world, was particularly vulnerable to shifts in this landscape. I began to subtly manipulate the environment, leveraging my connections to create obstacles in his path. A prestigious gallery opening, crucial for Julian's career advancement, suddenly found its funding withdrawn. A glowing review of his latest critique, destined for a prominent art journal, mysteriously disappeared from the publication schedule. Invitations to exclusive events, once a regular occurrence, became noticeably scarce. I didn't need to make overt moves, to spread malicious gossip or engage in slander. A carefully placed word here, a withdrawn recommendation there, was all it took to shift the walls of his professional world. The art world, with its intricate hierarchies and delicate power dynamics, was particularly susceptible to such subtle manipulations. At the same time, I began to sow seeds of doubt about Amelia's loyalty within her own professional circles. A casual remark about her distracted demeanor to a colleague, a subtle question about her frequent absences to a mutual friend, were enough to create an undercurrent of suspicion. Amelia, unaware of my machinations, attributed these setbacks to bad luck, to the capricious nature of their respective fields. But Julian, with his sharp intellect and keen awareness of the social currents, began to sense a pattern, a hidden hand orchestrating his misfortunes. The walls of their world were closing in, the once open landscape becoming increasingly constricted. The labyrinth was no longer confined to our home or our social circle. It had expanded to encompass their professional lives, creating a sense of claustrophobia, a feeling of being trapped in a game whose rules they didn't understand. With the foundations of their professional lives destabilized, I turned my attention to their social sphere. My aim was not to ostracize them completely, but to create an echo chamber, a distorted reality where their own insecurities and doubts would be amplified and reflected back at them. I began by subtly manipulating social gatherings. I would invite guests known to be critical of Julian's work, or those who held reservations about Amelia's recent behavior. I would steer conversations towards topics that highlighted their vulnerabilities, their insecurities, their perceived flaws. I used gossip as a weapon, not by spreading malicious rumors, but by subtly amplifying existing doubts and concerns. A casual mention of Julian's questionable past, a veiled reference to Amelia's changing priorities, were enough to set tongues wagging. Social media became my playground. I would create fake profiles, leaving ambiguous comments on their posts, sowing seeds of discord among their followers. I would share articles and blog posts that subtly criticized their choices, their lifestyles, their values. I even manipulated their online interactions, using algorithms and targeted advertising to ensure they were constantly bombarded with content that reinforced their anxieties and insecurities. Articles about the fragility of relationships, the dangers of infidelity, the consequences of betrayal, would appear on their news feeds with alarming regularity. The effect was insidious. Amelia and Julian, once confident and secure in their social standing, began to feel a growing sense of isolation. Their friends, once supportive and understanding, seemed to be withdrawing, their conversations laced with subtle judgment and disapproval. The echo chamber was working. Their own doubts and fears, amplified and reflected back at them, were creating a distorted reality where they were constantly on the defensive, constantly questioning their own perceptions. The labyrinth was no longer just a physical or professional construct. It had become a psychological prison, a hall of mirrors where their own insecurities were magnified and distorted. Having subtly poisoned their social environment, I turned my attention to their self-perception. I aimed to create a distorted mirror, reflecting back a warped image of themselves, one that highlighted their flaws and magnified their insecurities. Social media, with its curated realities and carefully constructed personas, became my primary tool. I started by subtly altering the narrative around them, using their own online presence against them. I would comment on Amelia's photos, praising her beauty while subtly hinting at her vanity, her need for external validation. I would engage with Julian's posts, acknowledging his intellect while subtly undermining his confidence, highlighting his perceived arrogance. I created fake accounts, posing as admirers, leaving comments that subtly exaggerated their flaws, playing on their insecurities. I would post seemingly innocuous questions, designed to provoke self-doubt and anxiety. Amelia, you seem a little stressed lately. Is everything okay? Or Julian, that last review seemed a bit harsh. Are you feeling the pressure? I even manipulated their online advertising, ensuring they were constantly bombarded with products and services that preyed on their vulnerabilities. Amelia would see ads for anti-aging creams and weight loss programs, while Julian would be targeted with ads for stress relief and confidence-building workshops. The effect was subtle but profound. Amelia and Julian, constantly exposed to this distorted reflection of themselves, began to internalize these criticisms, their self-perception slowly eroding. They started to doubt their own judgment, their own worth, their own reality. The labyrinth had become a hall of mirrors, reflecting back a distorted image of their relationship, their careers, their very selves. They were trapped in a world where their own insecurities were magnified and weaponized against them, a world where the line between reality and perception had become blurred. With their self-perception distorted and their social support eroded, Amelia and Julian became increasingly reliant on each other. Their affair, once a source of excitement and escape, became their primary reality, a refuge from the growing chaos of their lives. This dependence, however, was a trap, a hidden passage leading them deeper into the labyrinth. I, the architect of their disorientation, was ready to exploit it. I began to manipulate their communication, subtly introducing misunderstandings, amplifying existing tensions. A carefully timed phone call, a misplaced message, a misinterpreted word, were all it took to create friction between them. I would exploit their individual vulnerabilities, playing on Amelia's fear of abandonment and Julian's need for control. I would send anonymous messages, planting seeds of doubt about their partner's loyalty, their commitment, their true intentions. I would use their own words against them, subtly twisting their conversations, highlighting their differences, their incompatibilities. I would remind Amelia of Julian's past indiscretions, his reputation for infidelity. I would remind Julian of Amelia's insecurities, her need for stability and security. The effect was devastating. Amelia and Julian, once united against the world, began to turn on each other. Their conversations, once filled with passion and intimacy, became laced with suspicion and resentment. The trust that had been the foundation of their affair began to crumble, replaced by doubt and insecurity. The labyrinth had become a maze of hidden passages, leading them down a path of self-destruction. They were lost in a world of their own making, their own emotions weaponized against them. The closer they clung to each other, the deeper they fell into the trap I had set. The carefully constructed edifice of Amelia and Julian's world was beginning to crumble. The cracks in their foundation, the shifting walls, the distorted reflections, had taken their toll. The weight of their deception, amplified by my manipulations, was becoming unbearable. Julian's professional life, once a source of pride and accomplishment, was in shambles. His reputation tarnished, his opportunities dwindling. He found himself increasingly isolated from the art world he had once navigated with ease. The galleries that had once courted him now closed their doors. The critics who had once praised him now dismissed him with a wave of their hand. Amelia's social standing, once a source of confidence and security, was equally compromised. Her friends, once eager to include her in their gatherings, now avoided her, their conversations filled with whispers and veiled judgments. Her reputation as a loyal wife and trusted friend had been irrevocably damaged. The pressure was taking its toll on their relationship. The passion that had once burned so brightly was now a flickering flame, threatened by the winds of doubt and suspicion. Their conversations, once filled with laughter and intimacy, were now dominated by accusations and recriminations. The weight of their deception, the constant fear of exposure, the growing sense of isolation, was creating a suffocating atmosphere. The ceiling of their world was collapsing, the walls closing in, leaving them with no escape from the consequences of their actions. They were trapped in the labyrinth, their own desires and ambitions turned against them. The very things they had sought, excitement, validation, escape, had become the instruments of their downfall. The architect of their destruction, I watched from the shadows, a silent observer of their impending collapse. As their world crumbled around them, I tightened the screws of the labyrinth. The psychological pressure intensified, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance, a feeling of being watched, hunted. I used technology to my advantage, exploiting the ubiquitous presence of digital devices in their lives. Their phones would buzz with phantom notifications. Their computers would display cryptic messages. Their smart home devices would malfunction at odd hours. I would send anonymous emails, hinting at my knowledge of their affair, detailing their movements, their conversations. I would leave subtle clues in their physical environment, a misplaced object, a rearranged piece of furniture, a faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume. I even manipulated their dreams, using sleep-tracking apps to monitor their REM cycles, sending subliminal messages through their smart speakers, planting seeds of paranoia in their subconscious. The effect was chilling. Amelia and Julian began to feel like they were living in a panopticon, their every move scrutinized, their every word overheard. They started to question their own sanity, wondering if they were imagining things, if they were losing their grip on reality. The labyrinth had become a haunted house, filled with phantom footsteps, whispers in the dark, and unseen eyes. The fear of the unknown, the constant sense of being watched, was eroding their last vestiges of confidence and security. They were trapped in a nightmare, a psychological thriller where the villain was always one step ahead, always lurking in the shadows. The labyrinth was no longer just a psychological construct. It had become a tangible force in their lives, a malevolent entity that seemed to control their every move. I, the unseen hand guiding their descent, orchestrated a series of seemingly coincidental misfortunes, further eroding their sense of control and sanity. A sudden downpour would ruin a carefully planned outdoor event. A crucial business meeting would be canceled at the last minute. a prized possession would mysteriously disappear. These were not grand gestures, but subtle disruptions, designed to chip away at their confidence, to make them question their own judgment, their own luck. I would manipulate traffic lights, ensuring they were always delayed, always arriving late, always feeling flustered and out of sync. I would orchestrate encounters with people who would subtly undermine their confidence, planting seeds of doubt about their abilities, their worth. I even used the weather to my advantage, creating a sense of unease and foreboding. A sudden cold snap would coincide with a tense moment in their relationship. A storm would erupt just as they were about to reach a breakthrough. These seemingly random events, orchestrated with meticulous precision, created a sense of helplessness, a feeling that the universe was conspiring against them. Amelia and Julian, once masters of their own destiny, now felt like pawns in a game they couldn't understand, their lives controlled by forces beyond their comprehension. The labyrinth had become a malevolent puppet master, pulling the strings of their existence, orchestrating their every move. The unseen hand, always present, always manipulating, was driving them towards the brink, the final collapse of their carefully constructed world. The constant pressure, the relentless manipulations, the growing sense of paranoia, had taken their toll on Amelia and Julian's relationship. The once passionate affair, their refuge from the chaos, had become a battleground, a source of conflict and resentment. The trust that had once bound them together was shattered, replaced by suspicion and doubt. Every word, every gesture was scrutinized, analyzed for hidden meanings, ulterior motives. Their conversations, once filled with laughter and intimacy, were now laced with accusations and recriminations. The physical intimacy that had once been a source of comfort and escape now felt forced, a hollow imitation of the passion they had once shared. The joy had gone out of their encounters, replaced by a sense of obligation, a desperate attempt to cling to the remnants of their connection. The labyrinth had stripped away the illusion, revealing the emptiness at the heart of their affair. The excitement, the novelty, the escape from reality, had all faded, leaving behind a stark reality of betrayal, deceit, and broken trust. They were two lonely souls, trapped in a gilded cage of their own making. The walls of the labyrinth, once a source of protection, had become a prison, isolating them from the world, from each other. The room, once filled with the echoes of their passion, was now empty, a hollow shell of what it had once been. The architect of their destruction, I watched from the shadows, satisfied with the effectiveness of my design. The labyrinth had done its work, dismantling their relationship, exposing the fragility of their bond. The final act was approaching, the culmination of my carefully orchestrated revenge. The time had come to reveal my hand, to unveil the final design of my labyrinth. I had orchestrated their downfall with meticulous precision, manipulating their perceptions, eroding their support systems, and dismantling their relationship. Now it was time for the denouement, the final act of my revenge. I chose not a dramatic confrontation, not a public spectacle of their humiliation, but a more subtle, more insidious approach. I would expose their betrayal, not through angry accusations or tearful confessions, but through a carefully crafted message, a digital artifact that would serve as a permanent reminder of their transgression. I compiled all the evidence I had gathered, the emails, the messages, the photos, the digital footprints of their deceit, and wove them into a narrative, a story of betrayal and deception. I crafted a website, a virtual monument to their infidelity, detailing their every secret, their every lie. I then sent them each an anonymous email, a simple link to the website, the culmination of my meticulous design. The message was brief, devoid of emotion, a cold, clinical statement of fact. Your secrets are no longer safe. The impact was immediate and devastating. Amelia and Julian, confronted with the undeniable evidence of their betrayal, were thrown into a state of panic and confusion. Their carefully constructed facade crumbled, their lies exposed, their secrets laid bare for the world to see. The labyrinth had reached its final form, a digital monument to their downfall. The walls had closed in, the ceiling had collapsed, and they were left standing in the ruins of their own making, exposed and vulnerable. The architect of their destruction, I watched from the shadows, satisfied with the completion of my masterpiece. The digital monument to their betrayal stood as a stark testament to the effectiveness of my labyrinth. Amelia and Julian were left with the ruins of their relationship, their reputations, and their carefully constructed lives. The website, a virtual echo chamber of their deceit, spread like wildfire through their social circles, their professional networks, and even beyond. Their phones buzzed incessantly with notifications, messages, and calls, a constant reminder of their exposed secrets. Amelia, once admired for her grace and elegance, was now the subject of whispers and judgmental glances. Her friends, once eager to share her company, now avoided her, their conversations laced with pity and disapproval. Her professional opportunities dwindled, her reputation tarnished by the stain of infidelity. Julian, once a rising star in the art world, saw his career implode. His reviews were dismissed as biased, his opinions questioned, his integrity doubted. The galleries that had once courted him now shunned him, his name whispered in hushed tones as a cautionary tale. Their relationship, already fractured beyond repair, finally shattered under the weight of their exposed secrets. The trust was gone, replaced by resentment and bitterness. They were left with nothing but the ruins of their affair, a desolate landscape of broken promises and shattered dreams. I, the architect of their destruction, watched from a distance, a silent observer of their downfall. The labyrinth had served its purpose, dismantling their connection, exposing their vulnerabilities, and delivering a just and proportionate revenge. With my meticulously crafted plan complete, I withdrew from their lives, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. The ruins were theirs to inhabit, the consequences theirs to bear. My work was done.